Elton John, need I say more? Hi guys, today I'd like to take a look at one of my favorite Elton John songs, Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me. Let's see what we can learn from this. The song starts with one of the best piano intros ever. To understand what makes this so interesting, let's imagine a boring version first, and then compare that to what Elton plays. We're in the key of C and the intro is 4 bars long. Here's the basic chord progression. 2 bars of C, then 2 beats of F, back to C for 2 beats and then 1 bar of F. If we went Piano Ballad 101 on it, it might sound like this. That's unbearable, I can't even finish it. So let's first look at how he modifies that boring progression to make it dope. He stays on C for bar 1, okay. But then in bar 2 he goes, what if I go to C7 to set up the 4 chord? Okay, still pretty mid, but what if instead of adding that 7th to the right hand chord, we put it in the bass? How dope is that? And then he's like, well, since I'm on the B flat down here, why not resolve the bass down to A and play the F chord in first inversion? Now we're cooking with gas. And since inversions are fire, let's play the C chord that follows in second inversion. And back to F, this time in root position. You may have noticed that the result of all this inversion trickery is this awesome descending bass line. As opposed to... And then for extra kicks, on beat 4 of that last bar of the intro, he changes to D minor, which has the same function as the F chord, namely subdominant, just a slightly different color. So now that we turned this into this, let's look at 3 things he does to avoid the aforementioned Piano Ballad 101 vibe. Different rhythmic values. He uses half notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes, dotted notes. The rhythmic fabric is constantly shifting and therefore surprising and therefore interesting. Second, different numbers of notes. Similarly to the rhythmic variations, he also constantly changes the number of notes he plays in either hand. Single notes, 2-note, 3-note and 4-note chords. And 3, we got melody. A lot of good keyboard parts have a melodic component. And here in the intro, that's even more important because there's no singing yet. Also, the distinction we often make in music's theory between melody and harmony is a somewhat artificial one, even if it's sometimes useful. In reality, melody and harmony often overlap and blend into one thing. So in the beginning, we got this really prominent melody at the top. That's a signature part, right? You instantly recognize the song. And then there's this walk down in the left hand at the end of the intro, leading us into the verse. So you put all that together and you get this amazing intro. Okay, let's move on to the verse. There's a whopping 4 of them in a row before we get to the first chorus. And since this is Sir Elton John playing, we get a different version of the verse every time it happens, which gives us the opportunity to compare and extract the principles behind the variations in his playing. And we will see that he keeps using the 3 techniques we found in the intro. Rhythmic variations, using single notes and chords of different size, and interjecting melodies. Here's the chord progression. 2 bars of G, 2 bars of C with a 2-beat plagal suspension in the beginning, then 2 bars of F and 2 bars of G. Let's compare the first 2 bars of each verse. He starts on a G triad the first 3 times and on G7 the last time. Then at the end of the bar he plays a typical plagal move, so C over G in this case, which he places on the end of 4 twice, on the 4E once and on the 4 once. And in the second bar he goes to G7. So essentially he's doing this. Here's exactly what he plays in bars 1 and 2 of each verse. Here is an overview of all 4 versions. Comparing the general idea with each individual expression of that idea is one of the best ways of understanding the music on a deeper level and make it part of our own musical vocabulary. Notice the different versions of the G chord in bar 1. The C over G at the end of bar 1. And the G7 in bar 2. Okay, now let's do the same comparison for bars 3 and 4 of each verse. The G7 in bar 2 really makes us expect to get a C chord in bar 3, but instead he tricks us by delaying the resolution to C with an F over C chord, which then finally resolves to C on beat 3 of bar 3. And then the rest of bar 3 and bar 4 is the most complex section of the verses. It contains a combination of chord movement and melody that sets up the F chord in bar 5. Here's exactly what he plays in these 2 bars. And here is an overview of all 4 versions. Alright, let's move on to bars 5 and 6 of the verses. The main chord here is F. Like in bar 1, there is an embellishment at the end of bar 5, although it's a bit more subtle. In verses 1 and 2, it's just a single neighbor tone, G implying F sus2 and B flat implying F sus4. In verse 3, he plays B flat over F, which is the equivalent of C over G and F over C on the other 2 chords. And in verse 4, it's the G again. So here's exactly what he plays in these 2 bars. Here is an overview of all 4 versions. And then we get to the last 2 bars of the verse. Now this is interesting because the chord is G again, like in bars 1 and 2. So we can compare not only bars 7 and 8 of each verse, but also bars 1 and 2 to bars 7 and 8. And here's what we find. In bars 1 and 2, he goes from G to C over G and then G7. Whereas in bars 7 and 8, he plays G to C over G in both bars. That is because bar 2 sets up a move to the tonic chord C, so G7 makes sense there. But bar 8 is followed by G in bar 1 of the next verse, so the C over G makes more sense there. The exception here is verse 4, because that one leads to the chorus, so the progression here is different. C over G for a whole bar, and then G7 to F over G, which sets up the C chord at the beginning of the chorus. So here's exactly what he plays in bars 7 and 8 of the first 4 verses. And here is an overview of all 4 versions. Before we move on, just a quick observation regarding the left hand in the verses. It's another example of how he takes a basic idea, a basic pattern, and then repeats it a bunch of times, but with variations. What's interesting is that in the first half of each bar, he almost always plays the same rhythm, namely this one. But then in the second half of each bar, he alternates between a number of different variations. This, or this, or this, or this. Okay, now there's 2 more verses after the chorus, but in the interest of time, I'll skip those. This video is already gonna be pretty long. But he essentially does the same thing as in the first 4 verses, just with a bit more intensity. So now we've arrived at the chorus. It's 10 bars long, and here's the chord progression. It starts, like the intro, with C and C over B flat. But instead of F over A, this resolves to A minor 7 in bar 3. Then we got a passing tone G in the bass, leading to this chord, F sharp diminished. This one's interesting. It's pretty common to follow a 6 minor or 6 minor 7 chord, in this case that's A minor 7, with a chord that has F sharp in the bass. There are 4 versions of this: D over F sharp, D7 over F sharp minor 7 flat 5, or F sharp diminished. They all have the same function, but also their own unique character. A lot of sheet music for this song will say D7 over F sharp here, but on the record he definitely just plays an F sharp diminished chord. I have heard him play D7 on live versions though. And then that resolves to C over G, as it usually does. In bar 6 of the chorus, he plays F over G and G7. Notice that that's an inversion of the last bar before the chorus, where he plays G7 first and then F over G. In bars 7 and 8 we get C and C over B flat again, and then there's a big hold on F over A. The bass then walks down to D, this is reminiscent of the last bar of the intro, and then we get this big chordal walk up, D minor to C over E to F to C over G to F over A, and back to C for the interlude, which is similar to the intro. So let me play you Elton's piano part from the first chorus, and then I'll point out a few things. Here are a few observations about the chorus. He uses the melodic motif from the intro a couple of times as a counter melody to the vocals. Here, here, and here, and here. The last 2 bars of the chorus are markedly different in texture from anything we've heard so far. They delineate the completion of the first journey through the 3 sections of the song, intro, verse and chorus. This sets up the return to the intro interlude for round 2. And again, it's basically the same thing, except there's 2 verses instead of 4, and a double chorus towards the end. And the overall intensity is a bit higher, so busier rhythms, more filler notes, more elaborate melodic fills. But that's beyond the scope of this video. One more thing I do want to mention. Towards the end of the song, we get the following progression twice. Once between the last 2 choruses and once in the outro. It contains 2 modal interchange chords, flat 6 and flat 7. And that's it for today. Like and subscribe if you've enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time. Peace and love.